The Willowbrook plantation stood proudly along the Ashley River, its white columns gleaming in the late summer sun of 1839. The breeze carried the scent of magnolias and the distant sound of slave spirituals across the manicured grounds. Charleston, South Carolina, was the jewel of American aristocracy, and the Harrington family shone brightest among its elite. 23-year-old Eliza Harrington, with her porcelain skin and chestnut curls, was the envy of every Southern belle and the desire of every eligible bachelor from Virginia to Louisiana. "Miss Eliza, your father requests your presence in the study," said Martha, the house slave who had been with Eliza since childhood. Martha's dark eyes were downcast, her hands folded neatly at her waist as she delivered the message. Eliza sighed, setting aside her book of poetry. "Did he mention what this is about, Martha?" "No, miss. Only that it's urgent." The floorboards creaked beneath Eliza's feet as she made her way through the grand hallway. The walls were adorned with portraits of Harrington's past, their stern faces seeming to follow her movements with disapproval. Eliza had never felt comfortable under their painted gaze. Colonel William Harrington stood by the window, his imposing figure silhouetted against the fading daylight. At 53, he remained an intimidating presence, his military bearing undiminished by age or wealth. "Daughter," he said without turning, "I've received a letter from Henry Caldwell. He has formally requested your hand in marriage." Eliza felt the air leave her lungs. Henry Caldwell was 38, a widower with a reputation for cruelty toward his slaves and a cold indifference toward his first wife before her untimely death in childbirth. "Father, I cannot—" "You can and you will," Colonel Harrington interrupted. "The Caldwell plantation shares our western boundary. Combined, our lands would create the largest estate in the Carolina Low Country." "This is not a request, Eliza. The arrangements have been made." The colonel turned, his eyes as hard as flint. "The engagement will be announced at the autumn ball next month. You have until then to prepare yourself." Eliza's fingers trembled as she clutched the doorframe for support. "What of my wishes? What of love?" Her father's laugh was brittle. "Love? Is that what you've been reading in those novels? Love is a luxury for the common classes, Eliza. We marry for legacy, for bloodlines, for property. The Harrington name has stood for 3 generations, and I will not see it diminish under my watch." Later that night, unable to sleep, Eliza slipped from the main house. The night air was thick with humidity as she made her way to the slave quarters, a forbidden territory for the plantation's white women. But Eliza had been coming here in secret for months now. At the edge of the cotton fields stood a small wooden cabin, indistinguishable from the others, except for the faint light visible through its cracks. Eliza knocked softly, 3 gentle taps followed by 2 more. The door opened, revealing Isaiah, his broad shoulders filling the frame. At 26, he was the plantation's most valued slave, skilled in carpentry and horse training. His intelligence had earned him the dangerous privilege of literacy, secretly taught by Eliza herself. "You shouldn't be here," Isaiah whispered, his deep voice tinged with concern. "Not tonight. There are rumors." "What rumors?" Eliza asked, stepping inside. Isaiah closed the door carefully. "Overseers talking about strange happenings. Slaves disappearing from neighboring plantations. Some say they're running, but others—" He hesitated. "Others say they never make it to freedom." A chill ran down Eliza's spine despite the cabin's warmth. "Tell me." 3 slaves from the Billington place went missing last week, then 2 from Magnolia Bend. No one's seen them on the Underground Railroad routes. And there's something else. Isaiah moved closer, his voice dropping. "They say Massa Caldwell's overseer has been seen in the woods at night, far from where he should be." The mention of Caldwell's name made Eliza's stomach tighten. "Henry Caldwell has asked for my hand." Isaiah's face remained impassive, but Eliza saw the flicker of emotion in his eyes. They had been careful for months, their forbidden relationship hidden in shadows and whispers. To be caught would mean death for Isaiah and disgrace for Eliza. "When?" he asked simply. The engagement will be announced next month. The wedding, perhaps by winter. The silence between them grew heavy with unspoken words. We could run, Eliza finally said, her voice barely audible. North? To Boston, perhaps, or even Canada. Isaiah shook his head slowly. You know what happens to runaway slaves and to those who help them. Then we'll need help, Eliza insisted. There's a network. A sudden noise outside made them freeze. Footsteps crunched on the gravel path, then paused near the cabin. Eliza's heart hammered against her ribs as Isaiah extinguished the candle with his fingers. They stood motionless in the darkness, barely breathing. The footsteps resumed, moving away. Only when they faded entirely did Isaiah relight the candle. You need to go, he said urgently. Now. As Eliza hurried back to the main house, the shadows seemed to shift and move around her. The Spanish moss hanging from the ancient oaks resembled grasping fingers in the moonlight. For the first time, Willowbrook, her childhood home, felt like a prison. The following days passed in a blur of preparations. Colonel Harrington invited Henry Caldwell to dinner, forcing Eliza to sit across from her intended husband as he discussed crop yields and slave prices with her father. Caldwell's eyes, cold and assessing, would occasionally drift to Eliza, lingering on her face and figure with proprietary interest. I hear you're quite the accomplished pianist, Miss Harrington, Caldwell remarked over dessert. Perhaps you might favor us with a performance? At her father's nod, Eliza rose and moved to the grand piano in the adjoining parlor. As her fingers touched the keys, she noticed Caldwell's slave, a man named Solomon, standing motionless in the corner. Unlike the Harrington house slaves, who wore clean, simple clothing, Solomon's shirt was threadbare, his back bearing visible welts through the thin fabric. Eliza played mechanically, her mind elsewhere. When she finished, Caldwell applauded with exaggerated enthusiasm. Exquisite, he said. I shall have to acquire a newer instrument for Oak Ridge. The one my late wife used has fallen into disrepair. Later that night, Eliza overheard Solomon speaking to Martha near the kitchen. Not natural. What happens there? Solomon was saying, his voice trembling. They go into that cellar, and they don't come out again, not alive leastways. Hush now, Martha replied. These walls have ears. I'm telling you, something evil happens in that house. Massa Caldwell, he ain't right in the head. The things I've seen. Martha must have noticed Eliza's presence, for she quickly cut Solomon off with a warning glance. The two slaves hurried away, leaving Eliza standing alone in the darkened hallway, the fragments of their conversation echoing in her mind. The next morning, Eliza rode her mare along the property line, separating Willowbrook from the Caldwell plantation. The boundary was marked by a small stream that wound through a dense patch of woods. It was here, years ago, that Eliza had first encountered Isaiah, who had been sent to repair a fence. Their initial conversations, hesitant, cautious, had grown into something neither could have anticipated. As she approached the stream, Eliza noticed unusual activity on the Caldwell side. Several men were digging what appeared to be a large pit, while others loaded something heavy onto a cart. Curious, she guided her horse closer, using the trees for cover. A cold dread settled in her stomach as she realized what she was seeing. The men were burying bodies, slave bodies. Even from this distance, she could count at least 3 corpses, partially wrapped in burlap sacks. One of the overseers looked up suddenly, his gaze scanning the tree line. Eliza pulled back just in time, her heart racing as she urged her horse away from the grisly scene. That evening she confided in Isaiah during another risky meeting in his cabin. I saw them, Isaiah. They were burying people on Caldwell land. I think, she swallowed hard, I think they might be the missing slaves. Isaiah's expression darkened. There have always been rumors about Caldwell. They say he conducts experiments, that he believes in scientific theories about Negro inferiority and tries to prove them. Experiments? Eliza repeated, horror creeping into her voice. Medical procedures, surgeries without anesthesia, measuring pain responses. Isaiah's voice was flat, emotionless, but his eyes betrayed his fear. Some say he keeps records, detailed notes on how long it takes for a man to die under certain conditions. Eliza felt bile rise in her throat. These are more than rumors, Isaiah. I saw those bodies with my own eyes. A grim determination settled over her. I won't marry him, and I won't let him continue these atrocities if we can find evidence of what he's doing. And then what? Isaiah asked. Who would believe a slave's word against a wealthy white planter? Who would even care? I would, Eliza said firmly, and others would too. Not everyone in Charleston supports such barbarity. The sound of the dinner bell rang across the plantation, signaling Eliza's required presence at the evening meal. I must go, she said, rising reluctantly. But we will continue this conversation. There must be a way to expose Caldwell for what he is. What Eliza didn't know as she hurried back to the main house was that her absence had been noted. Her father's most trusted overseer, Mr. Daniels, had been watching the slave quarters, and he had seen the plantation owner's daughter emerging from Isaiah's cabin for the second time that week. The following morning, Eliza was awakened by screams. Rushing to her window, she saw a crowd gathered near the whipping post. In the center stood Isaiah, his wrists bound to the wooden structure, his back exposed. Mr. Daniels stood beside him, whip in hand, while Colonel Harrington looked on with cold fury. Eliza ran downstairs and out onto the lawn, still in her nightgown. "Stop! What are you doing?" "Return to the house immediately," her father commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. "What has he done?" Eliza demanded, ignoring the order. Colonel Harrington's face was a mask of controlled rage. "This slave has been teaching others to read. Books were found in his cabin, my books taken from my library." Eliza's blood ran cold. The books had been gifts from her, borrowed volumes of poetry and philosophy that Isaiah had treasured. She had been careless, leaving them in his cabin too long. "The punishment for teaching slaves to read is 30 lashes, Mr. Daniels said with grim satisfaction. "Colonel Harrington has mercifully reduced it to 25. "Father, please," Eliza begged, aware of the eyes of both slaves and white overseers upon her. Her reaction was already inappropriate, too emotional for a mere slave's punishment. "Isaiah is valuable property. His carpentry skills will still be useful once his back heals," her father finished coldly. "Now return to the house, or I shall have Martha escort you." Helpless, Eliza watched as the first lash tore across Isaiah's back. He made no sound, his jaw clenched tight against the pain. By the 5th stroke, blood ran freely down his skin. By the 10th, Eliza could bear it no longer and fled back to the house, her sobs echoing through the morning air. That night, defying all reason, Eliza slipped out to the slave infirmary where Isaiah had been taken after his punishment. The small building smelled of blood and herbal poultices, dimly lit by a single lantern. Isaiah lay face down on a pallet, his back a landscape of torn flesh. An elderly slave woman named Ruth, who served as the plantation's healer, sat beside him, applying a mixture of honey and herbs to the wounds. "Miss Eliza," Ruth whispered, alarmed. "You can't be here." "I need to speak with him," Eliza insisted. "Please, Ruth, just for a moment." Ruth hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "He's weak from blood loss, but conscious. I'll stand watch outside." The old woman shuffled to the door, leaving them alone. Eliza knelt beside Isaiah's pallet. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "This is my fault." Isaiah turned his head slightly, his eyes finding hers in the dim light. "Not your fault," he managed, his voice hoarse. "My choice to keep the books." "We have to leave," Eliza said urgently, "as soon as you can travel. What I saw at Caldwell's plantation, I can't marry that monster. And after this, my father will never let me near you again. They'll sell you, Isaiah. Or worse." Isaiah was silent for a long moment. "There's a man," he finally said. "A free black carpenter in Charleston named Gabriel Wilson. He works with the Underground Railroad. If we can get a message to him. A sudden commotion outside interrupted their conversation. Ruth burst through the door, panic etched on her lined face. "Massa Caldwell is here, with your father. They're coming this way." Eliza's heart stopped. There was nowhere to hide in the small infirmary, nowhere to run without being seen. "Quick, child," Ruth hissed, pulling Eliza toward a low cupboard where medical supplies were kept. "It's too small for a grown man, but you might fit." Eliza squeezed into the tight space, drawing her knees to her chest as Ruth closed the cupboard door, leaving only a small crack through which Eliza could see part of the room. Moments later, the door opened to admit Colonel Harrington and Henry Caldwell. "This is the one, then?" Caldwell asked, his voice clinical as he surveyed Isaiah's wounded back. "Yes, strong specimen, despite his current condition. Intelligent too, unfortunately. Been teaching himself to read." Caldwell made a sound of interest. "Self-taught literacy. That would make him an ideal subject for my research." "He's yours, then," Colonel Harrington said. "Consider it a wedding gift, an early one." "Most generous," Caldwell replied. "I'll send men to collect him tomorrow. The injuries are actually quite convenient for my purposes. I've been wanting to document the healing process under controlled conditions." Eliza pressed her hand against her mouth to stifle a gasp. They were giving Isaiah to Caldwell, delivering him to torture and certain death. "The girl doesn't know?" Undu Caldwell asked as they turned to leave. "About our arrangement?" "No. Eliza has always been too soft-hearted about the slaves. A trait from her mother, I'm afraid. She'll learn the realities of plantation management after your wedding." "And about this particular slave?" Colonel Harrington's voice hardened. "What about him?" "There are rumors, William, whispers among the house slaves. Your daughter has been seen visiting the slave quarters at inappropriate hours." A heavy silence fell. Eliza felt her heart pounding so loudly she was certain they must hear it. "Impossible," her father finally said. "Eliza knows her place and her duty." "Of course," Caldwell agreed smoothly. "Still, it might be wise to remove temptation. I'll take the slave to Oak Ridge immediately, tonight, rather than waiting for morning." After they left, Eliza burst from her hiding place, frantic. "We have to get you out now," she told Isaiah. "Tonight." Ruth, who had returned after the men departed, shook her head gravely. "They've posted guards outside, Miss Eliza. 2 men with rifles. They know something's not right." Eliza's mind raced. There had to be a way. "Ruth, do you know Gabriel Wilson, the carpenter Isaiah mentioned?" "I know of him," Ruth said cautiously. "My sister's boy works in his shop." "Can you get a message to him, tonight?" Ruth glanced nervously at the door. "There's a delivery going to Charleston at first light, vegetables for the market. My grandson Tobias is driving the cart. If I could get word to him—" "Do it," Eliza urged. "Tell him to find Wilson. Tell him we need help escaping Willowbrook tomorrow night." Isaiah reached for Eliza's hand, his grip weak but insistent. "Eliza, listen to me. If we're caught—" "We won't be," she interrupted. "I'll come for you tomorrow night. Be ready." As Eliza slipped back to the main house, the moon disappeared behind gathering storm clouds. In the distance, thunder rumbled across the Carolina sky, a fitting backdrop to the desperate plan forming in her mind. Little did she know that the horrors of Oak Ridge Plantation were far worse than even the rumors suggested, and that her decision to defy her father and Caldwell would set in motion a chain of events that would expose the darkest secrets of Charleston society. The morning dawned with an oppressive heat that seemed to press down on Willowbrook Plantation like a physical weight. Eliza stood at her bedroom window, watching as Isaiah, barely able to stand, was loaded into a cart bound for Oak Ridge. Her father and Henry Caldwell observed the transfer from the front porch, sharing brandy despite the early hour. Her plan had to work. She had spent the sleepless night gathering what they would need: money from her personal savings, a small pistol that had belonged to her grandfather, maps of the surrounding counties, and a few essential items that could fit into a satchel. Now all depended on Ruth's grandson successfully delivering the message to Gabriel Wilson, and Wilson agreeing to help them. "Miss Eliza?" Martha's soft voice came from the doorway. "Your father requests your presence for breakfast. Mr. Caldwell will be joining you." Eliza took a deep breath, composing herself. "Tell him I'll be down shortly, Martha." As the house slave turned to leave, Eliza called her back. "Martha, have you heard anything from Ruth about the delivery to Charleston?" Martha's eyes widened slightly, then darted to the open door. She stepped closer to Eliza, lowering her voice. "Tobias left at dawn with the cart. That's all I know, miss." "Thank you, Martha. That's all I needed to hear." Breakfast was an exercise in restraint. Eliza forced herself to eat small bites of ham and biscuits while Caldwell expounded on his plans for expanding his cotton production. "The key is efficiency," he told Colonel Harrington, "maximizing output per slave. I've been developing a system of incentives and disincentives that has proven quite effective." "Fascinating," Eliza's father replied, clearly impressed. "I've always found that traditional methods of discipline work well enough, but I'm open to innovation. Perhaps you might visit Oak Ridge next week, William. I could show you my record-keeping system. I document everything: productivity, punishment, physical condition of each slave." Caldwell's pale eyes flicked to Eliza. "You should join us, my dear. As my future wife, you'll need to understand these management techniques." Eliza set down her fork, fighting to keep her expression neutral. "I would be interested to learn more about your methods, Mr. Caldwell." His thin lips curved into what might have been a smile. "Excellent. I have a particular experiment planned for next week that should prove educational." After breakfast, Eliza excused herself to the garden, needing fresh air to clear her head. The rose bushes her mother had planted years ago still bloomed despite the August heat, their sweet scent a reminder of a gentler time. Eliza had been only 10 when her mother died of yellow fever. Would things have been different if she had lived? Would her mother have allowed this marriage to Caldwell? "Eliza," her father's voice interrupted her thoughts. Colonel Harrington approached, his cane tapping against the flagstone path. "I hope you were suitably attentive to Henry at breakfast. He remarked that you seemed distracted." "I apologize, Father. I didn't sleep well." The colonel studied her face. "Henry is a good match, Eliza. One of the finest plantations in South Carolina, bloodlines that go back to the first settlers. You will want for nothing as his wife." "Except happiness," Eliza murmured. Her father's expression hardened. "Happiness is a frivolous concern. Duty, legacy, propriety, these are what matter. Your mother understood this. It's time you did as well." He turned to go, then paused. "There's something else. Daniels reported some concerning behavior on your part. Visits to the slave quarters at inappropriate hours." Eliza felt her blood run cold, but she kept her face impassive. "Mr. Daniels is mistaken. I occasionally check on ill slaves, as Mother used to do. Perhaps that's what he saw." "Perhaps." The colonel didn't sound convinced. "Nevertheless, I've instructed Daniels to keep a closer eye on you until the wedding, for your own protection, of course. Charleston has become dangerous lately. Slave insurrections, abolitionists stirring up trouble." The implication was clear. She was being watched. Her father suspected something, though perhaps not the full extent of her relationship with Isaiah. "I understand, Father," Eliza said demurely. "I'll be more careful about my movements." The hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. Eliza was summoned to the parlor to help plan the engagement ball, forced to discuss flower arrangements and guest lists with her father's sister, Aunt Agatha, who had arrived from Savannah for the occasion. Throughout it all, she felt Daniel's eyes on her, tracking her movements from various vantage points around the house and grounds. As evening approached, Eliza grew increasingly anxious. Had Tobias delivered the message? Would Gabriel Wilson help them? And most crucially, how would she evade Daniel's watchful eye to make it to Oak Ridge after nightfall? An opportunity presented itself unexpectedly when Aunt Agatha complained of a headache. "I have some lavender oil in my room," Eliza offered. "It helps with pain if rubbed at the temples." Once upstairs, Eliza moved quickly. She changed into a simple dark dress, stuffed pillows under her bed covers to create the illusion of a sleeping form, and collected her prepared satchel from its hiding place. The lavender oil she brought down to Aunt Agatha was only a momentary delay in her escape plan. "I think I'll retire early," Eliza announced after dinner. "The heat has given me a headache as well." "Of course, dear," Aunt Agatha said sympathetically. "Use some of that lavender oil yourself." Colonel Harrington merely nodded, already turning his attention back to his brandy and newspaper. In her room, Eliza waited, counting the minutes as darkness fell over Willowbrook. At 10:30, when the household had settled for the night, she eased open her window. Her bedroom was on the second floor, but an ancient oak tree grew close enough that its branches nearly touched the house. It would be a difficult climb, especially in a dress, but not impossible. Just as she was about to swing her leg over the windowsill, a soft knock came at her door. "Miss Eliza," Martha's voice, barely audible. Eliza froze, then quickly pulled back inside and closed the window. "Yes, Martha." The door opened a crack, and Martha slipped in. Her eyes widened at the sight of Eliza fully dressed, the open window behind her. "Miss Eliza, Martha hesitated, then drew a deep breath. "A message came for you, from Charleston." Hope surged through Eliza. "Gabriel Wilson?" Martha nodded. "Tobias spoke with him. He says to tell you that help will come from the river, at midnight." Relief washed over Eliza. "Thank you, Martha. Thank you." Martha wrung her hands nervously. "There's more, miss. Mr. Daniels is stationed at the bottom of the stairs, and there are men watching the slave quarters, the stables, and the main gate." Eliza's heart sank. Her father had effectively imprisoned her in the house. The window escape was her only option, but it would be visible from certain parts of the grounds. "Miss Eliza," Martha said hesitantly, "I could create a distraction in the kitchen, a small fire in the stove, perhaps." Eliza stared at the house slave in surprise. "Martha, that's too dangerous." "If they suspect you helped me, Ruth told me what Massa Caldwell does to his slaves," Martha interrupted, her voice suddenly firm. "Isaiah was kind to all of us, taught my boy his letters when no one was looking. I won't let him die in that place." Tears welled in Eliza's eyes. "I don't know how to thank you. Just go, miss. Get Isaiah out. Find freedom." Martha paused at the door. "Give me 10 minutes to get to the kitchen. When you hear the commotion, that's your chance." True to her word, exactly 10 minutes later, shouts erupted from the direction of the kitchen. Eliza could hear Daniel's voice barking orders, her father's deeper tones demanding to know what was happening. Moving quickly, she slipped through her window and onto the nearest oak branch. The rough bark scraped her palms as she carefully made her way down the massive trunk, her dark dress blending with the shadows. Once on the ground, Eliza kept to the tree line, working her way around to the stables. She needed a horse. The journey to Oakridge would take too long on foot. The stables were being watched, but the guard's attention was now divided between his post and the growing commotion at the main house, where orange flames could be seen flickering in the kitchen windows. Taking advantage of his distraction, Eliza crept to the back of the stables. There was a small door used for mucking out stalls that was often left unlatched. She slipped inside, the familiar smell of hay and horses filling her nostrils. Moving by touch in the darkness, she found her mare, Penny, and quickly fitted her with a bridle. There was no time for a saddle. Leading Penny out through the same back door, Eliza guided the horse to the edge of the woods before mounting. The soft ground muffled the mare's hoofbeats as they set off toward the river road that would take them to Oakridge. The night was moonless, clouds obscuring the stars, a blessing for someone trying to move undetected. Eliza pushed Penny to a canter once they were safely away from Willowbrook, the warm summer air rushing past her face. Her mind raced ahead to Oakridge and Isaiah. Would she be able to find him? What condition would he be in after a day in Caldwell's possession? Oakridge Plantation appeared on the horizon after almost an hour of hard riding. Unlike Willowbrook's white-columned grandeur, Caldwell's mansion was a somber brick structure, imposing rather than beautiful. Gas lamps burned at the front entrance, but the rest of the house was dark. Eliza guided Penny toward the slave quarters, which were located behind the main house, past a row of tobacco-drying barns. As she approached, Eliza was struck by the silence. At Willowbrook, even at night, there would be sounds from the slave quarters. Hushed conversations, occasional laughter, sometimes singing. Here, there was nothing. The buildings themselves were in poorer condition than those at Willowbrook, the wood rotting in places, the roofs sagging. Eliza dismounted, tethering Penny to a tree at the edge of the clearing. Moving cautiously from shadow to shadow, she made her way to the first cabin. Through a small window, she could see several sleeping forms crowded onto pallets on the dirt floor. But Isaiah wasn't among them. She checked 3 more cabins with similar results. In the 4th, an elderly woman was awake, sitting by the dying embers of a small fire. When Eliza's face appeared at the window, the woman started in fear. "Please," Eliza whispered, "I'm looking for a man named Isaiah. He would have arrived today from Willowbrook." The old woman stared at her suspiciously. "You's Massa Harrington's girl." Eliza was taken aback. "You know me. Heard tell of you. The girl who teaches slaves to read." The woman moved closer to the window. "They don't bring new ones to the quarters. Not first. They go to the cellar." A chill ran through Eliza despite the warm night. "What cellar? Where?" The woman pointed a gnarled finger toward the main house. "Under the east wing. There's a door round the back. That's where they do the experiments." "Thank you," Eliza whispered. "Please, if anyone asks—" "Didn't see nothing," the woman finished. "Wouldn't matter if I did. Nobody listens to old Bessie anymore." Approaching the main house was far more dangerous than the slave quarters, but Eliza had no choice. She kept to the shadows, moving inch by inch across the open lawn. The east wing of the house was the oldest section, built by Caldwell's grandfather in the previous century. As Eliza rounded the corner, she saw the cellar door, a slanted wooden structure leading underground, secured with a heavy padlock. Her heart sank. She hadn't considered that the cellar might be locked. The small pistol in her satchel would be useless against a padlock, and she had brought no tools that could break it. As she crouched in the darkness, considering her options, a sound made her freeze. Footsteps approaching from around the house. Eliza pressed herself against the brick wall, barely breathing. A figure appeared, moving purposefully toward the cellar door. In the dim light, she recognized Solomon, Caldwell's personal slave. To her astonishment, Solomon produced a key from his pocket and unlocked the padlock. He glanced around furtively, then descended into the cellar, leaving the door slightly ajar behind him. Eliza hesitated only a moment before following. The stairs led down into darkness, the air growing cooler and damper with each step. At the bottom, a long corridor stretched before her, dimly lit by a single oil lamp hanging from the ceiling. The walls were rough stone, the floor packed earth. Several heavy wooden doors lined the corridor, all closed. From one of them came the sound of Solomon's voice, too low to make out the words. Eliza crept forward until she could hear more clearly. "Have to hurry," Solomon was saying. "Massa's gone to Charleston for the night, but he could return early. The boat will wait at the landing until midnight, no longer." "I can't leave without her," came Isaiah's voice, weak but determined. "She's risking everything to help me escape." "The white girl? You're a fool, Isaiah. She won't come, and if she does, she'll only get you caught." "You don't know Eliza." Eliza pushed the door open. "He's right, Solomon. You don't know me." Both men turned in shock. Isaiah was sitting on a low cot, his back heavily bandaged, his face drawn with pain. Solomon stood by a small table that held medical instruments, some of which Eliza couldn't identify. "Miss Harrington," Solomon gasped. "How did you—" "That doesn't matter now," Eliza interrupted. "What's this about a boat?" Solomon and Isaiah exchanged glances. "Gabriel Wilson sent men with a boat," Solomon finally explained. "They're waiting at the river landing, half a mile east of here, but only until midnight." Eliza glanced at a clock on the wall. It was already 11:30. "We have to hurry. Can you walk, Isaiah?" Isaiah nodded, rising shakily to his feet. "Not fast, but I can manage." "What is this place?" Eliza asked, looking around the room. It resembled a physician's examination room, but with disturbing differences. There were restraints attached to the cot, and the instruments on the table looked more suited to torture than healing. "Massa Caldwell's laboratory," Solomon said grimly. "He fancies himself a man of science. Studies the Negro physiology, he says. Wants to prove we're a separate species from whites." "How many others are down here?" Eliza asked, her gaze moving to the other doors in the corridor. Solomon's face darkened. "5 currently. 3 men, 2 women. Some been here for months." "We have to help them too," Eliza said immediately. Solomon shook his head. "No time. Most can't walk anyway, not after what's been done to them, and the boat can only take 3 or 4 at most." The moral dilemma tore at Eliza's heart. To leave others behind to suffer while she escaped with Isaiah seemed unthinkable. But Solomon was right. They had barely enough time to reach the boat as it was. "Go," came a voice from the corridor. Eliza turned to see Bessie, the old woman from the slave quarters, standing in the doorway. "I'll tend to them best I can. Get yourselves to freedom, then send help back." "How did you get in here?" Solomon asked, alarmed. "Same way I always do," Bessie replied cryptically. "Known about this place for years. Left food for them when I could. Now go." With Solomon leading the way, they made their way back up the cellar stairs and into the night. Isaiah leaned heavily on Eliza. His breathing labored from the effort of walking. They moved as quickly as his condition allowed, keeping to the tree line that ran along the edge of the plantation grounds. "There's one more obstacle," Solomon whispered as they approached a small rise. "Caldwell has men patrolling the path to the river landing. We'll have to go the long way around, through the swamp." The swamp was a dense, marshy area that bordered both the Caldwell and Harrington properties, extending all the way to the Ashley River. It was known to be treacherous, with sinkholes and quicksand, not to mention snakes and alligators. "We don't have time for the long way," Eliza said, checking the small pocket watch she had brought. "It's already 10 minutes to midnight." "Then we'll have to risk the path," Solomon decided. "Stay close to me." They had just crested the rise when a shout rang out behind them. Turning, Eliza saw lanterns bobbing in the darkness back at the main house. The alarm had been raised. "Run," Solomon urged, taking more of Isaiah's weight. "The landing is just beyond those cypress trees." They half ran, half stumbled down the slope toward the river, the sounds of pursuit growing behind them. Eliza's lungs burned as she helped support Isaiah, whose face was tight with pain, but who continued moving forward through sheer will. As they reached the cypress grove, 2 figures emerged from the shadows, black men armed with rifles. Eliza instinctively reached for her pistol, but Solomon called out a greeting. "Friends," he said. "Gabriel Wilson sent you." The taller of the 2 men nodded. "Where's the rest?" "Just us 3, Solomon replied, "and we need to move fast. Caldwell's men are right behind us." The men led them to a small rowboat hidden among the reeds at the river's edge. As they helped Isaiah aboard, shouting could be heard from the direction of the path. "They're coming!" Eliza gasped, clambering into the boat. One of Wilson's men pushed them off from shore, while the other took up position behind a fallen log, rifle ready. "Get down river," he instructed. "We'll hold them off, buy you some time. There's a larger boat waiting 2 miles downstream. It'll take you to Charleston." As their rescuer began to row, the night erupted with gunfire behind them. Eliza ducked instinctively, but the shots weren't directed at the boat. Wilson's man was exchanging fire with Caldwell's overseers. They were 100 yards downstream when a piercing scream echoed across the water, followed by silence. Their rower increased his pace, his expression grim. "Your friend stayed behind," Isaiah said quietly. "He might be dead because of us." "He knew the risks," the man replied, not breaking rhythm. "We all do. That's the price of defiance in this world." "Oh," The small boat slipped silently through the dark water, the sounds of pursuit fading behind them. Cypress trees draped with Spanish moss lined the riverbanks, creating a tunnel-like effect that made Eliza feel they were journeying into another world. In a way, they were. After what seemed like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, they came upon a larger vessel moored in a small inlet, a fishing boat, with a cabin and small sail. 3 more men were waiting, one of them a stocky, middle-aged black man with graying temples, whom Eliza guessed was Gabriel Wilson himself. "You made it," he said, as they transferred Isaiah carefully to the larger boat. "We heard gunfire." "Your man stayed behind," their rower reported. "James, he was covering our escape." Wilson's face remained impassive, but Eliza saw pain flash in his eyes. "He was a brave soul. His sacrifice won't be forgotten." He turned to Eliza with undisguised curiosity. "You're the Harrington girl. Ruth's message said you were helping this man escape, but I didn't believe it until now." "Isaiah and I are leaving together," Eliza said firmly. "We plan to go north." Wilson exchanged glances with the other men. "That's a dangerous journey for anyone, especially a white woman of your station traveling with a black man." "We have money," Eliza said, patting her satchel, "and I'm never going back. My father would kill me for what I've done, and Caldwell—" She shuddered. "You know what he's capable of." Wilson studied her face, seeming to measure her resolve. "Very well. We'll take you to Charleston. I have connections there who can help you get passage on a ship bound for Philadelphia. From there, you'll have guides to take you further north, perhaps to Canada." Indeed, as they set sail, moving silently downriver toward Charleston, Eliza sat beside Isaiah in the small cabin. Solomon had elected to stay with Wilson, whose Underground Railroad operation could use a man with inside knowledge of Oak Ridge. "Are you in much pain?" Eliza asked, gently touching Isaiah's arm. He managed a small smile. "Less now that we're away from that place. Caldwell, he was just getting started with me. The things I saw in that cellar, Eliza, the people there." His voice broke. "We'll send help back for them," Eliza promised. "Once we're safe, we'll find a way." Isaiah took her hand, his expression serious. "You've given up everything for me. Your home, your family, your position in society. Are you sure this is what you want?" Eliza squeezed his hand. "I've never been more certain of anything. Willowbrook stopped being my home the moment I understood what it truly was, a place of cruelty disguised as civilization. My father stopped being my family when he tried to sell me to a monster for a few acres of land." She looked out the small cabin window at the passing landscape, the familiar shores of the Ashley River that had been her world for 23 years. "There's no going back now, only forward, to whatever freedom we can find." As the boat rounded a bend in the river, the lights of Charleston came into view in the distance, the city that represented both the height of Southern culture and the depths of its moral bankruptcy. Somewhere in that city, a ship waited to take them north, away from the suffocating constraints of plantation society and its brutal hierarchies. But Eliza knew their journey was far from over. The news of her disappearance would spread quickly. Her father would not simply let her go, not his only child, not his property as he saw her. And Henry Caldwell, whose research she could expose, would have even greater reason to hunt them down. The price of their defiance might yet be higher than either of them could imagine. Charleston harbor glittered with the first light of dawn as Gabriel Wilson's fishing boat drifted toward a dilapidated wharf on the city's north side. This area, far from the elegant homes and businesses of the peninsula, was populated primarily by free blacks and poor whites, people who existed on the margins of Charleston society. "We'll dock here," Wilson explained in a low voice. "Fewer questions asked in this part of town." Isaiah had spent the night in fitful sleep, his fever rising and falling. Eliza had barely left his side, applying cool cloths to his forehead and helping him sip water when he woke. Now, as they prepared to disembark, she worried about his ability to travel further. "He needs rest," she told Wilson, "and proper medical attention." Wilson nodded grimly. "I know a place, a safe house run by a Quaker woman who has some medical knowledge. We'll take him there first." Two of Wilson's men carried Isaiah from the boat, supporting him between them as they made their way through narrow, garbage-strewn alleys. Eliza followed closely, her silk dress now dirty and torn, drawing curious stares from the few people already stirring in the early morning hours. The safe house turned out to be a modest two-story building on a quiet street. A weathered sign identifying it as a milliner's shop hung above the door. Wilson knocked in a specific pattern, 3 quick taps, a pause, then 2 more. The door was opened by a slender white woman in her 50s, her grey, streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun. She took in the situation at a glance. "Bring him to the back room," she instructed, her voice carrying a northern accent. "Quickly now." The interior of the shop was simple but clean, with half-finished hats and bonnets displayed on wooden forms. The woman led them through to a small room behind the shop that contained a narrow bed, a washstand, and little else. "This is Mrs. Rebecca Halsey," Wilson introduced as Isaiah was carefully laid on the bed. "She's been aiding our cause for many years." Mrs. Halsey was already examining Isaiah's wounds, her expression growing graver as she unwrapped the crude bandages. "These need to be cleaned properly," she said. "The risk of infection is high." She glanced at Eliza. "And who might you be, young lady? You're certainly not dressed for this part of town." "This is Miss Eliza Harrington," Wilson said before Eliza could answer. "Colonel Harrington's daughter." Mrs. Halsey's eyebrows rose. "William Harrington's girl, running with escaping slaves?" She shook her head in disbelief. "Well, if that isn't a twist of fate. Your father has contributed significantly to the slave patrols over the years, Miss Harrington. Did you know that?" "I'm not surprised," Eliza replied, her voice steady. "But I'm not my father." "Clearly not." Mrs. Halsey turned back to Isaiah. "I'll need hot water, clean cloths, and my medicine kit from upstairs." "While Mrs. Halsey tended to Isaiah, Wilson took Eliza to a small sitting room adjacent to the shop. "You can't stay in Charleston long," he said without preamble. "By now, your disappearance has been discovered. Your father will have the city watched, as will Caldwell, once he realizes what you saw at Oak Ridge." "When can we leave for Philadelphia?" Eliza asked. Wilson's expression grew troubled. "That's the difficulty. The ship I had arranged has been delayed, some issue with the customs officials. It won't sail for at least 3 days. Eliza felt a surge of panic. 3 days? We can't hide in Charleston for 3 days. Not with Isaiah in his condition, and not with every slave catcher in the Carolinas looking for us. I understand your concern, but there are few alternatives. No other ships bound for northern ports are willing to take the risk of carrying fugitive slaves." Wilson paused. "There is one possibility, though it's dangerous. A merchant ship sailing for New Orleans tomorrow. From there, you could potentially find passage up the Mississippi to the Free States." "New Orleans?" Eliza frowned. "That's deeper into slave territory, not away from it." "Yes, but it's also a major port with ships departing for all manner of destinations, and it would throw off any pursuit. Your father would expect you to head north, not west." Before Eliza could respond, Mrs. Halsey entered the room, wiping her hands on a cloth stained with blood and herbal poultices. "I've cleaned the wounds and applied a drawing salve," she reported. "But he's very weak. The fever concerns me most. He shouldn't be moved for at least a day, preferably 2. Wilson shook his head. "That may not be possible, Rebecca. The authorities will be searching every corner of Charleston soon. Then you'll have him die on the journey instead," Mrs. Halsey said bluntly. "Those lash wounds are deep, and there's evidence of additional trauma. What happened to this man?" "Henry Caldwell happened," Eliza said bitterly. "He conducts experiments on slaves in a cellar beneath his house. Isaiah was only there for a day, but others—" She swallowed hard. "Others have been there much longer." Mrs. Halsey's face paled. I've heard rumors about Oak Ridge, terrible rumors that I dismissed as exaggerations. If what you're saying is true, Miss Harrington, then this goes beyond the usual cruelties of slavery. It's true, Eliza confirmed. I saw the evidence with my own eyes, and I fear that once Caldwell realizes I know about his activities, he'll stop at nothing to silence me. The gravity of her situation seemed to settle more heavily on Mrs. Halsey's shoulders. You'll both need disguises if you're to remain in Charleston until your ship sails, and you can't stay here. This place is known to some as a sympathizer's home. It's only a matter of time before it's searched. I have another safe house, Wilson offered. More secluded, on the outskirts of the city. Good, Mrs. Halsey nodded. I'll gather supplies for Isaiah's continued care, and clothes for Miss Harrington. She can't go about in that dress. She might as well carry a sign announcing her identity. As the older woman bustled out, Wilson turned to Eliza with a serious expression. There's something else you should know. Word has already spread about last night's events at Oak Ridge. Solomon made it back to the plantation and caused quite a disturbance, freed 2 more slaves from the cellar before escaping again. Eliza's eyes widened. Is he safe? For now. He's hiding with friends of mine. But Caldwell returned earlier than expected and found his laboratory disturbed. He's in a rage, apparently, and your father— Wilson hesitated. What about my father? He's offering a substantial reward for your return, $500, and another $500 for the capture of Isaiah, dead or alive. The amount was staggering, more than most people in Charleston would see in years. It would attract bounty hunters from across the South. We have to leave Charleston as soon as possible, Eliza decided. Tonight, if Isaiah is strong enough. We'll take our chances with the New Orleans ship. Wilson studied her for a moment, then nodded. I'll make the arrangements. The ship is called the Merida. It departs at noon tomorrow from the Central Wharf. Mrs. Halsey returned with a bundle of clothing. Simple, sturdy garments that would help Eliza blend in with the working-class residents of Charleston's northern district. You'll need to change your appearance as well, she advised, handing Eliza a pair of scissors. That distinctive hair of yours is too recognizable. Eliza took the scissors with a steady hand. Her chestnut curls had always been a point of pride, often compared to her mother's. Cutting them seemed symbolic somehow, another severance from her old life. I'll do it, she said firmly. After changing into the plain grey dress and white cap provided by Mrs. Halsey and cutting her hair to just below her ears, Eliza hardly recognized herself in the small mirror. The elegant plantation Belle was gone, replaced by someone who could pass for a shopkeeper's assistant or a domestic servant. Isaiah, too, was given new clothing, simple workman's garb that would help him blend in as a free black laborer. Though such men were viewed with suspicion in Charleston, his fever had broken, and while still weak, he was lucid and determined to continue their journey. You should leave separately, Wilson advised as evening approached. A white woman and a black man traveling together will attract attention, regardless of your disguises. No, Eliza said firmly. Isaiah is too weak to travel alone. We go together. Wilson looked like he wanted to argue, but instead sighed in resignation. Then we'll need a story. You'll pose as a widow returning to her family in Louisiana, with Isaiah as your recently purchased servant. It's not uncommon for white women of modest means to travel with a single slave. I won't pretend to own him, Eliza objected. It's just a disguise, Isaiah said quietly from the doorway, where he stood leaning against the frame for support, and it's safer than the alternatives. Mrs. Halsey had prepared a small cart for their journey to Wilson's second safe house. Concealed beneath sacks of flour and dry goods, Eliza and Isaiah would be smuggled through Charleston streets as evening fell. As they prepared to depart, Wilson pulled Eliza aside. There's something else you should know. A rumor has reached me from one of my contacts at the docks. Henry Caldwell sailed for New York 3 days ago. New York? Eliza was confused. But he returned to Oak Ridge last night. Wilson shook his head. Not according to my source. The passenger manifest for the Celestine, bound for New York, clearly listed Henry Caldwell among its travelers. That's impossible, Eliza insisted. Solomon saw him at Oak Ridge. Perhaps, Wilson conceded, but the Celestine definitely sailed with someone using Caldwell's name. It's strange, I admit. The puzzle troubled Eliza as they made their way through Charleston's darkening streets. The cart jostled over cobblestones, each bump sending waves of pain across Isaiah's features. Eliza held his hand beneath the covering of sacks, offering what comfort she could. Wilson's second safe house was located in a wooded area beyond the city limits, a small cabin that had once belonged to a freedman who died the previous winter. It was sparse but secure, with shuttered windows and a root cellar that could serve as a hiding place if needed. You'll be safe here until tomorrow, Wilson assured them. I'll come for you before dawn to escort you to the docks. The Merida sails at noon, but you'll need to board early before the docks become too busy. After Wilson departed, Eliza tended to Isaiah's wounds as Mrs. Halsey had instructed, changing the poultices and bandages. His back was a landscape of torn flesh, but the salve seemed to be drawing out the infection. His fever remained, though less severe than before. You should try to sleep, Eliza told him, helping him lie on his side on the cabin's single narrow bed. What about you? Isaiah asked, his voice weak but concerned. I'll keep watch. She settled into a chair by the window, drawing aside the edge of the shutter to peer out at the moonlit clearing around the cabin. Rest now. We have a long journey ahead tomorrow. And Isaiah's breathing soon deepened into sleep, but Eliza remained vigilant, her grandfather's pistol close at hand. Every snapping twig or rustling leaf in the surrounding woods set her nerves on edge. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that danger was closing in around them. Her mind returned to Wilson's puzzling information about Caldwell. If he had truly sailed for New York days ago, who had Solomon seen at Oak Ridge? And why would Caldwell leave South Carolina just before his engagement was to be announced? The pieces didn't fit together, and that unnerved Eliza more than the strange sounds in the woods. Dawn was just breaking when a sharp rap at the door startled Eliza from her uneasy vigil. She gripped the pistol tightly, moving silently to the door. "Who's there?" she called softly. "Gabriel Wilson," came the reply, "and Solomon." Eliza unbolted the door to find not only Wilson and Solomon, but also Mrs. Halsey, her face drawn with worry. "What's wrong?" Eliza asked immediately, noting their grave expressions. "There's been a development," Wilson said, stepping inside. "Solomon came to my home last night with disturbing news." Solomon, his face haggard from what must have been a difficult journey, nodded grimly. "After I left you last night, I went back to Oak Ridge. Had to see if I could help the others in the cellar." "That was incredibly dangerous," Eliza admonished. "Had to be done," Solomon replied simply. "But when I got there, the place was in chaos. Massa Caldwell was in a rage like I've never seen. He had the overseers whipping slaves for information, demanding to know who helped you escape." "Did anyone talk?" Solomon shook his head. "Not that I heard, but that's not the worst of it. Massa Caldwell, he was ranting about papers that were missing from his study, research notes he called them. Said they were proof of something important. The documentation of his experiments," Eliza guessed. "I think so," Solomon agreed. "He seemed more concerned about those papers than about you or Isaiah escaping." Mrs. Halsey interrupted. "There's more. The militia has been mobilized. They're conducting door-to-door searches in Charleston, starting with known abolitionist sympathizers." Eliza's heart sank. "Then we can't wait until noon. We need to get to the Merida now." "The ship won't be ready to board for hours," Wilson objected. "Then we'll hide nearby until it is," Eliza insisted. "We can't stay here." Isaiah had awakened during the conversation and struggled to sit up. "I can travel," he assured them, though his face was still pale with fever. Wilson considered their options. "There's a warehouse near the Central Wharf owned by a friend. You could wait there until the Merida is ready to board." We should leave immediately, Eliza said, gathering their few belongings. The journey into Charleston was tense, with Wilson driving the cart while Mrs. Halsey sat beside him, playing the role of his wife. Eliza and Isaiah were once again hidden beneath sacks and crates, this time with additional concealment provided by a false bottom Wilson had installed in the cart. They passed through the city gates without incident, the guards barely glancing at the elderly couple with their cart of market goods. But as they made their way toward the harbor, they encountered increasing numbers of militia and slave patrols, stopping pedestrians and searching vehicles. "This is worse than I expected," Wilson muttered. "They've set up checkpoints on all the major streets leading to the docks." "Can we go around?" Mrs. Halsey asked anxiously. "Not without drawing suspicion." Wilson guided the cart down a narrow side street. "We'll have to risk the smaller checkpoint ahead. It's manned by the regular town watch, not the militia. They tend to be less thorough." As they approached the checkpoint, Eliza could hear the guards questioning those ahead of them. They seemed to be asking specifically about a young white woman traveling with a male slave. "They have descriptions of us," she whispered to Isaiah, who lay pressed against her in the cramped space beneath the cart's false bottom. "Don't speak," he whispered back. "Even breathing too loudly could give us away." The cart rolled to a stop. Eliza could hear Wilson's genial voice greeting the guards, explaining that he and his wife were bringing vegetables to sell at the harbor market. There was a pause, then the sound of footsteps circling the cart. "What's in all these sacks?" a gruff voice demanded. "Just potatoes and onions," Wilson replied easily. "Feel free to check." Eliza held her breath as a guard prodded the sacks above them. One heavy boot stepped directly on the false bottom, mere inches from her face. The wood creaked, but held. "All right, move along," the guard finally said. "But be quick about your business at the harbor. We're clearing the area by midday." "Is there trouble, sir?" Wilson asked innocently. "Just following orders. Colonel Harrington's daughter has gone missing, possibly abducted by a runaway slave. The colonel has convinced the governor to authorize a full-scale search." The cart jerked forward as Wilson flicked the reins. Only when they were well past the checkpoint did Eliza dare to breathe normally again. "Abducted," she whispered bitterly. "Of course that's what my father would claim. He could never admit I left willingly." They reached the warehouse without further incident. Wilson's friend, a nervous man named Parker who managed the shipping operation, showed them to a small office on the second floor. "You can wait here," he said, glancing frequently toward the door. "But I can't guarantee your safety if they search the building. The militia has been in and out all morning." "What are they looking for specifically?" Wilson asked. "Not what. Who," Parker corrected. "They have descriptions of the Harrington girl and the slave, but they're also asking questions about you, Gabriel. Someone must have talked." Wilson's expression darkened. "We have a traitor in our midst, then." "It was only a matter of time," Parker said grimly. "There's too much money offered for information. $500 would change a man's circumstances considerably." Eliza felt a wave of guilt. Her presence had endangered Wilson's entire Underground Railroad operation in Charleston. "I'm sorry," she told Wilson after Parker had gone. "I never intended to bring this trouble to your doorstep." Wilson waved away her apology. "This is the work I've chosen, Miss Harrington. The risks come with it." He moved to the window, peering cautiously out at the harbor. "The Merida is docked, just visible from here. Once they begin boarding passengers, we'll make our move." Hours passed with agonizing slowness. Isaiah's condition worsened again, his fever rising as they waited. Mrs. Halsey administered the last of the herbal remedies she had brought, but her expression was worried. "He needs a proper doctor," she murmured to Eliza. "These wounds are beyond my skill to treat." "Once we're aboard the Merida, perhaps the ship's surgeon could help," Eliza suggested. Mrs. Halsey shook her head doubtfully. "Ship surgeons aren't known for their gentle care, especially not for slaves." Shortly before noon, Parker returned with news. "They've started boarding the Merida," he reported. "But there's a problem. The militia is checking every passenger against a list, and they're searching the cargo too." Wilson cursed under his breath. They must have guessed our plan. Someone has been very thorough in anticipating our moves. There's something else, Parker added reluctantly. Colonel Harrington himself is at the docks, overseeing the search, and he's not alone. Henry Caldwell is with him. Eliza felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath her feet. Caldwell? But that's impossible. Wilson said he sailed for New York days ago. Apparently not, Parker replied, because I just saw him with my own eyes, speaking with the militia captain at the Merida's gangplank. Wilson's brow furrowed in confusion. My information came from a reliable source. The passenger manifest for the Celestine clearly listed Henry Caldwell. Could someone have used his name? Mrs. Halsey suggested. Or perhaps there are two Henry Caldwells in Charleston. Or perhaps, Eliza said slowly, a terrible suspicion forming in her mind, Caldwell never intended to leave Charleston at all. Perhaps the New York journey was merely a ruse to establish an alibi for something else. Isaiah, who had been listening silently from his place on a makeshift pallet, spoke up weakly. The cellar at Oak Ridge, the experiments. What if they aren't just Caldwell's private madness? What if they're part of something larger? A heavy silence fell over the room as they considered the implications. If Caldwell's barbaric research had institutional support, from medical schools, scientific societies, or even the government, then the danger they faced was far greater than they had realized. We need a new plan, Wilson finally said. The Merida is no longer an option. What about overland? Eliza suggested desperately. Could we make our way north by foot or by coach? Wilson shook his head. The main roads will all be watched, and in Isaiah's condition, traveling cross-country would be a death sentence. Then we're trapped, Eliza said, despair creeping into her voice. Not necessarily. Wilson appeared to be considering something. There's one possibility we haven't discussed. It's extremely risky, but it might be our only option now. What is it? Eliza asked, ready to grasp at any chance. My cousin captains a small trading vessel that runs between Charleston and the Sea Islands. It's scheduled to depart this afternoon, carrying supplies to the plantations on Edisto Island. How does that help us? Mrs. Halsey asked skeptically. Edisto is still in South Carolina, still slave territory. Yes, Wilson acknowledged, but from Edisto, my cousin sometimes makes unofficial journeys to Haiti. The implication hung in the air. Haiti, the Black Republic born of slave revolution, a nation that offered freedom to any escaped slave who reached its shores. It was a destination rarely used by the Underground Railroad due to the dangerous sea crossing and the language and cultural barriers that awaited arrivals. But it represented a kind of freedom unavailable anywhere in the United States. Haiti, Eliza repeated, turning the possibility over in her mind. How long would the journey take? Under good conditions. About 10 days. But it would mean leaving behind everything familiar to you, Miss Harrington. Haiti is not kind to whites, especially those with connections to slave-holding families. Eliza looked at Isaiah, whose eyes had brightened at the mention of Haiti, despite his fever. Is it what you want? She asked him softly. A land where no man calls me property? Isaiah managed a weak smile. Yes. It's what I've dreamed of since I first learned such a place existed. The decision made, Wilson left to find his cousin and make the necessary arrangements. Mrs. Halsey remained with Eliza and Isaiah in the warehouse office, keeping watch through the small window that overlooked the harbor. Your father and Caldwell are still at the Merida, she reported. They're searching every passenger thoroughly. Eliza joined her at the window, staying carefully to one side to avoid being seen. From this vantage point, she could make out her father's tall figure on the dock. Colonel William Harrington stood ramrod straight in his military bearing, directing the militia with authoritative gestures. Beside him was Henry Caldwell, slighter in build, but no less commanding in his presence. As Eliza watched, Caldwell turned slightly, looking up toward the warehouses that lined the harbor. For a heart-stopping moment, she thought he was looking directly at their window. There was something in his expression, a cold calculation, a predatory focus that sent a shiver down her spine. "He knows," Eliza whispered, stepping back from the window. "Somehow, he knows we're here." No sooner had she spoken than shouts erupted from the street below. Looking out again, Eliza saw militia members running toward their warehouse, directed by Caldwell's pointing finger. "They're coming," Mrs. Halsey cried, moving away from the window. "We need to hide." Parker burst into the room, his face pale with fear. "Militia's surrounding the building. You need to go now. There's a back staircase that leads to the alley behind the warehouse." Isaiah struggled to his feet, swaying dangerously. Eliza rushed to support him, draping his arm over her shoulders. "This way," Parker urged, leading them down a narrow corridor to a steep, rickety staircase. The alley connects to Battery Street. From there, you can reach the South Wharf where the island traders dock. "What about Wilson?" Eliza asked as they began their descent. "He won't know where to find us." "I'll tell him," Mrs. Halsey promised. "Now go." They had just reached the bottom of the stairs when the sound of the warehouse's front door being broken down echoed through the building. Voices shouted commands to search every corner, every crate. Parker pushed open a small door that led to the alley. "Run!" he whispered urgently. "And may God go with you." The alley was narrow and dank, wedged between the warehouse and a cooperage. Eliza half-carried, half-dragged Isaiah along its length, his weight growing heavier with each step as his strength failed. Behind them, she could hear the militia entering the back stairwell, their boots thundering on the wooden steps. "We're not going to make it," Isaiah gasped, his face contorted with pain. "Just a little further," Eliza encouraged, though she too was beginning to lose hope. They emerged from the alley onto Battery Street, a wide thoroughfare that ran along Charleston's southern edge, facing the harbor. To their right lay the central wharf, where the Merida was docked. To their left, about half a mile distant, was the South Wharf. "There they are!" The shout came from behind them as the first militia members burst from the alley. Eliza looked desperately for somewhere to hide, but Battery Street offered no cover. It was broad daylight, and they were exposed on all sides. Just as the militia closed in, a carriage came careening down the street, pulling up sharply beside them. The door flew open to reveal Gabriel Wilson at the reins. "Get in!" he shouted. Eliza needed no second urging. With a final surge of strength, she helped Isaiah into the carriage, then scrambled in after him. Wilson cracked the whip, and the horses leapt forward, leaving the startled militia members in their wake. "My cousin's ship is the Osprey," Wilson called over his shoulder as they raced toward the South Wharf. "It's the small sloop at the end of the pier. He's waiting for you." They had covered perhaps half the distance to the South Wharf when another shout rose behind them. Glancing back, Eliza saw mounted militia giving chase, with her father and Caldwell among them. "They're gaining on us," she warned Wilson. "We'll make it," he assured her, though his voice betrayed his doubt. The carriage wheels struck a rut in the road, nearly toppling the vehicle. Wilson struggled to maintain control as they careened toward the wharf entrance. Behind them, the militia were close enough now that Eliza could hear her father's voice, ordering them to shoot out the carriage wheels. A shot rang out, splintering wood near Eliza's head. She ducked instinctively, pulling Isaiah down with her. "Almost there," Wilson encouraged, steering the carriage onto the wooden planking of the South Wharf. The Osprey was visible now, a small but sturdy sloop with its sails already unfurled, ready for immediate departure. A man who bore a family resemblance to Wilson stood on the deck, waving them forward urgently. 50 yards from the ship, disaster struck. Another shot from the militia found its mark, shattering one of the carriage's rear wheels. The vehicle lurched violently, then toppled onto its side, sending its occupants tumbling across the wharf. Eliza landed hard, the breath knocked from her lungs. Dazed, she looked around for Isaiah and found him a few feet away, unmoving. Wilson had been thrown clear, but appeared stunned, struggling to regain his feet. The thunder of hooves announced the militia's approach. Eliza crawled to Isaiah, relieved to find him breathing but unconscious, his fever burning hotter than ever. "Isaiah," she whispered urgently, shaking him. "We have to move." His eyes fluttered open, unfocused, with pain and fever. "Can't," he murmured. "Go." "Without me." "I won't leave you," Eliza said fiercely. Wilson staggered over to them. "The ship," he gasped, pointing to the Osprey. "It's our only chance." Together, they managed to get Isaiah to his feet. With Wilson supporting one side and Eliza the other, they stumbled toward the waiting vessel. Behind them, the militia had dismounted and were advancing on foot, rifles raised. "Stop, or we'll shoot," came the commanding voice of Colonel Harrington. Eliza didn't look back. 20 yards from the ship. 15. 10. A shot cracked the air. Wilson jerked, then collapsed, a dark stain spreading across his shirt. "Gabriel!" Eliza cried, trying to support both men now. "Keep going," Wilson groaned, pushing himself up on one elbow. "I'll hold them off." With a supreme effort, Eliza half-carried, half-dragged Isaiah the remaining distance to the Osprey. The captain reached down to help pull Isaiah aboard, while crew members extended planks and ropes to assist. As Eliza prepared to climb aboard herself, a familiar voice stopped her cold. "Eliza," her father called, his tone softer now. "This madness has gone far enough. Come home." "All will be forgiven." She turned to face him. Colonel Harrington stood 10 yards away, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled from the chase. Behind him, Henry Caldwell watched with those cold, calculating eyes. "Forgiven," Eliza repeated incredulously. "What I've seen can never be forgiven, Father, or forgotten. You don't understand what's at stake," her father pleaded, taking a step closer. "This is bigger than you or me, bigger than one runaway slave." "I understand perfectly," Eliza replied. "I saw Caldwell's cellar. I know what happens there." Colonel Harrington's expression hardened. "Then you know too much for your own good." He glanced at Caldwell, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "But it's not too late. Come home and we can protect you." "From what, Father? From whom? From your friend Caldwell and his experiments?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed her father's face. "Eliza, please, tell me the truth," she demanded. "Are you part of it? Do you know what happens in that cellar?" The colonel's silence was answer enough. Caldwell stepped forward, his voice smooth as oil. "My research is essential, Miss Harrington. The advancement of medical science requires certain sacrifices. Your father understands this, as do many prominent men in Charleston." "Sacrifices," Eliza spat the word. "Those are human beings in your cellar, not sacrifices for your twisted science." "They are property," Caldwell corrected coldly. "And they serve a higher purpose in death than they ever could in life. The knowledge we gain improves surgical techniques that save white lives." Behind her, Eliza could feel the Osprey beginning to pull away from the dock. The captain hissed urgently, "Now or never, miss." "The papers I took from your study," Eliza said to Caldwell, a sudden intuition striking her. "They implicate others, don't they? Respected doctors, politicians, perhaps even ministers. That's why you're so desperate to get them back." Caldwell's face contorted with rage. "Those documents are my property. Years of research, evidence of murder," Eliza corrected, "and I'll make sure the world knows of it." She turned to her father one last time. "Goodbye, Father. May God forgive you, for I cannot." With that, she leapt for the Osprey's railing as the ship pulled away. Strong hands grabbed her, pulling her aboard as the first bullets splashed into the water where she had been moments before. Caldwell's voice carried across the widening gap between ship and shore. "Find them! I want those papers!" As Charleston receded behind them, Eliza knelt beside Isaiah on the deck. His breathing was labored, his skin burning hot, despite the sea spray cooling the air around them. "Hold on," she whispered, clasping his hand. "Just hold on." Wilson's cousin, Captain James Wilson, approached with a grim expression. "Your friend needs more care than I can provide," he said. "But I know someone on Edisto who might help. A healer, a Gullah woman named Mama Oshun. Will we reach Edisto before they catch us?" Eliza asked, glancing back at the harbour where several boats were being hastily prepared for pursuit. "The Osprey is small, but fast," the captain assured her, "and I know these waters better than any militia captain. We'll lose them in the marsh channels." True to his word, Captain Wilson guided the Osprey through a maze of narrow waterways between low-lying islands, eventually emerging into the open waters of the Atlantic as the sun began to set. By nightfall, they had reached Edisto Island, dropping anchor in a secluded cove known only to the local fishermen. Mama Oshun turned out to be an elderly black woman who lived in a small cabin deep in the maritime forest that covered much of the island. Her reputation as a healer drew both black and white islanders seeking remedies that conventional medicine couldn't provide. "Fever bad," she pronounced after examining Isaiah. "Infection in blood now. Needs strong medicine." For 3 days, Eliza barely left Isaiah's side, as Mama Ocean treated him with concoctions of herbs, roots, and sea elements whose names Eliza didn't recognize. The fever broke on the 4th day, and Isaiah opened his eyes, truly lucid for the first time since their escape from Charleston. "We made it?" he asked weakly. Eliza smiled, tears of relief filling her eyes. "To Edisto, yes. Captain Wilson is arranging passage to Haiti as soon as you're strong enough to travel." Isaiah's recovery was slow but steady. By the end of the week, he was able to sit up and take short walks outside the cabin. Mama Ocean declared him healing good and gave Eliza additional medicines for the sea journey ahead. During their time on Edisto, news reached them from the mainland. Gabriel Wilson had survived his gunshot wound and was in custody in Charleston, facing charges of aiding fugitive slaves, a crime that could result in imprisonment or worse. Mrs. Halsey's millinery shop had been ransacked, but she had escaped, her whereabouts unknown. Most disturbing was the news about Oak Ridge. Following their escape, Henry Caldwell had apparently abandoned the plantation entirely, taking his most loyal overseers and several slaves with him. The fate of those who had been imprisoned in the cellar remained a mystery. 2 weeks after their arrival on Edisto, Captain Wilson returned with word that the Haitian voyage was ready. They would depart that night under cover of darkness. As they prepared to leave Mama Ocean's cabin, the old healer took Eliza aside. "You carry heavy thing," she said, her dark eyes piercing. "Not just in your bag, but in your heart. The truth be powerful medicine, but also dangerous poison. Use it wise." Eliza realized the woman somehow knew about Caldwell's papers, which she had kept hidden in her satchel throughout their journey. "I will," she promised. The voyage to Haiti would be their greatest challenge yet. 10 days on the open ocean in a small vessel, evading both storms and potential pursuit. But as the Osprey slipped away from Edisto under a moonless sky, Eliza felt something she hadn't experienced since leaving Willowbrook: hope. Isaiah stood beside her at the railing, still weak but improving daily. "Do you have regrets?" he asked quietly, watching the dark shoreline of South Carolina fade into the night. Eliza thought of her father, of the life of privilege she had abandoned, of the danger they had faced and would likely face again. Then she thought of the people in Caldwell's cellar, of Solomon's courage, of Gabriel Wilson's sacrifice. "No," she said firmly. "No regrets. Only a promise to use what we know, what we've seen, to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves." As the Osprey sailed eastward toward Haiti and freedom, Eliza clutched the satchel containing Caldwell's papers, evidence of atrocities committed in the name of science, documents that could expose the darkest secrets of Charleston society. These papers were now her responsibility, her burden, and perhaps someday her weapon in the battle against the institution that had nearly destroyed them both. The shores of America receded behind them, but the truth they carried would someday return. A reckoning for all who had profited from suffering, a voice for those who had been silenced in the cellars and fields of the South. 10 years later, July 1849, Boston, Massachusetts. The offices of the North Star abolitionist newspaper bustled with activity as the afternoon edition went to press. Frederick Douglass himself, the paper's founder and most famous escaped slave in America, was reviewing the final layout when a quiet knock interrupted him. "Come," he called, not looking up from his work. The door opened to reveal a slender woman in her early 30s, her chestnut hair cut fashionably short beneath a modest bonnet. She wore a simple but well-made dress, the kind favored by middle-class Bostonians. Only her eyes, intense, haunted by memories, hinted at an extraordinary past. "Mr. Douglass," she said, her voice carrying the faintest trace of a southern accent. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." Douglass rose, extending his hand. "Mrs. Taylor, I presume. Please sit down." Eliza Taylor, formerly Eliza Harrington of Charleston, took the offered seat, placing a worn leather satchel on her lap. "Your letter mentioned documents," Douglass said. "Evidence of medical experiments conducted on slaves in South Carolina." Eliza nodded. "Yes. I've kept them safe for a decade, waiting for the right moment, the right platform to make them public. And you believe that moment is now?" "I do." Eliza opened the satchel, removing a bundle of yellowed papers. "These are the research notes of Henry Caldwell, a plantation owner who conducted surgical experiments on his slaves. The documents implicate dozens of prominent Southern physicians who participated in or supported his work." Douglass took the papers carefully, his expression grave as he scanned the first page. "This is horrific," he said finally. "It was worse than what's written there," Eliza replied quietly. "I saw the cellar where it happened. I helped one man escape it. Your husband, Isaiah Taylor." Eliza smiled slightly. "You've done your research, Mr. Douglass. When someone offers evidence of this magnitude, I make it my business to know who they are." Douglass studied her face. "The daughter of a wealthy plantation owner who fled with an enslaved man, survived Haiti's turmoil, and eventually made her way to Boston. Your story itself would make compelling reading." "Indeed, my story is not why I'm here," Eliza said firmly. "These documents could change how the North views Southern medicine. They prove that slavery isn't just an economic system. It's a framework for dehumanization that permits the most grotesque violations of human dignity." Douglass nodded thoughtfully. "Publishing these will cause an uproar. The Southern medical establishment will deny everything. They'll claim the documents are forgeries. They're authentic. Caldwell's handwriting can be verified, and there are witnesses, former slaves who survived his procedures, who can testify to what they saw. At great personal risk," Douglass noted. "Freedom always comes at a price," Eliza said, the words heavy with the weight of her own experience. "Isaiah and I understood that when we fled Charleston. We understand it still." As they discussed publication details, a tall black man entered quietly through a side door. Isaiah Taylor, now a respected carpenter in Boston's free black community. The scars on his back remained, hidden beneath his fine linen shirt, but he carried himself with dignity, his gaze steady and clear. "The children are with Mrs. Pierce," he told Eliza. "Everything is prepared if we need to leave quickly." The publication of Caldwell's documents would make them targets once again. Despite the decade that had passed, the powerful men implicated in those pages, many still alive and influential, would stop at nothing to discredit or silence them. "Are you certain you want to proceed?" Douglass asked them both. "You've built a life here. Publishing these papers will put everything at risk." Isaiah and Eliza exchanged glances, a look that spoke of shared suffering, shared strength, and shared purpose. 10 years ago, we made a promise," Isaiah said quietly, "to those left behind in that cellar, to Solomon, who gave his life helping others escape, to Gabriel Wilson, who spent 5 years in a Charleston prison for aiding us. We promised that the truth would be told," Eliza finished, "whatever the cost." 1 week later, The Medical Crimes of Charleston appeared as a special edition of the North Star. The response was immediate and dramatic. Southern newspapers denounced it as abolitionist propaganda. Northern medical journals demanded investigations. Congressional debates grew heated as the evidence was discussed in increasingly partisan terms. And in a modest home on the outskirts of Boston, Eliza and Isaiah Taylor waited, watching their children play in the summer twilight, knowing that their past had finally caught up with them, for better or worse. "No regrets?" Isaiah asked, echoing the question he had posed a decade earlier on the deck of the Osprey. Eliza took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "Never," she replied. "Some truths must be told, no matter how painful. Some prices must be paid, no matter how high." But as darkness fell over Boston, they stood together, free in body and conscience, their shared sacrifice a testament to the enduring human spirit and the relentless pursuit of justice in a world built on its denial. The story of Eliza Harrington and Isaiah would eventually become legend in abolitionist circles. The Southern Belle and the enslaved craftsman who defied convention, escaped tyranny, and exposed the darkest secrets of American slavery. But on that summer evening in 1849, they were simply a family watching the fireflies rise in their garden, their freedom hard-won but never taken for granted. For they knew better than most that liberty's light burns brightest against the backdrop of remembered darkness.